And we know that when we've lost sight of that, we can tend to idealise how we were and how wonderful things were. And we know that wasn't the reality. So, but it's that pain and that coming from that wound we have that we can only see the positives of how things used to be because it's so painful where we are now. So it's really important that I get people to go, okay, who were you? And draw a really good picture of that and really step into that. And then who are you now? And then we'll start to peel off the layers. Well, okay, this is what I see. Ask a couple of other people in your life how they see you now. And of course, all those strengths and those things are still there. So when they get that feedback, they go, oh, they said this, this, and this. And ask them how they think you are in how have you changed now, and then they'll ask that, and then they'll go, oh, they actually think I'm stronger now. Well, obviously give them these positive things that they haven't been able to see themselves.
Welcome to Hopeful and Wholesome, the show where ambitious women come home to their bodies. I'm your host, Hope Pedraza, and I'm a functional practitioner, human design guide, and expert on all things energy, and your partner in decoding the language of your body. This is your space to reconnect with your body's wisdom, reclaim your energy, and rise into alignment in your health, your business, and your life. Because thriving isn't about pushing harder, it's about learning to listen deeper. So let's dive in because your next breakthrough starts right now. Hey y'all, welcome back to Hopeful and Wholesome. Today I have on the show Dr. Natalie Green, and she is a leading voice in trauma recovery and post-traumatic growth, best-selling author and creator of the Trauma Archetypes of Transformation and the ABS method, which are transformative frameworks designed to help people accelerate their journey from trauma to post-traumatic growth. Her books, Key to Freedom, The 7-Step Model to Triumph Over Trauma, and Break Your Trauma Cycle, The 7 Archetypes of Transformation, combined with her Growing Tall Poppies podcast, have inspired thousands to reclaim their lives, find joy, freedom, and purpose after adversity. And that's what we're talking about today. We are talking about post-traumatic growth and what that means. We hear about post-traumatic stress and how that affects the body. But I love what Dr. Natalie brings forward about this post-traumatic growth and about these different trauma archetypes and how when you understand the different trauma archetypes, how this can help you heal because everyone heals differently. And you know, I am a huge fan of the whole conversation around bio-individuality. And this is that same conversation, but around trauma. So it's such a unique conversation, such a unique take on healing from trauma. And I recommend, even if you feel like you haven't been through big T trauma in your life, this conversation is from you because as a human, we experience trauma on a regular basis, whether it's big T or little t. And so this conversation around post-traumatic growth and the archetypes of transformation can help anyone and everyone. So get ready to take some notes because Dr. Nat's going to bring it to us here. So let's jump in. All right, y'all. I'm here with Nat, and I'm so excited to have you. She's joining us bright and early in Australia. So thanks for getting up early with me today.
Thank you so much for having me, Hope. I'm super excited and more than happy to get up early for you.
I'm so glad. I'm excited too because as I mentioned before we hit record, we've talked about trauma in different capacities on this show. And I feel it can be, kind of a trendy topic these days. But I think that the way you approach it, I mean, this is not anything we've ever talked about before. And I think the way that you approached it and the way that you talk about it is so unique. And so I'm excited to dive into this. And I just want to jump right in because I want to start just to kind of give context for what we're talking about. Because I think everybody is familiar with, dealing with trauma or like the concepts of dealing with trauma. And, we talk about post-traumatic stress, like all those kind of things. But you talk about post-traumatic growth, which I love. So can you tell us what is that? What does that look like?
Yeah, so post-traumatic, like we know what post-traumatic stress is, post-traumatic stress disorder. So you're stuck in trying to basically just survive after the trauma and going over and over what's happened, where things are. Post-traumatic growth is what I love to focus on because it's far more hopeful. It looks at how to move forward despite our trauma. So really, that's probably the best way to describe it. It's looking forward that, yes, the trauma has still happened. Post-traumatic growth doesn't mean the trauma has disappeared and it never happened, didn't matter. It did matter and it does matter. It means that trauma is no longer running the show.
That makes so much sense. So when we're looking at like managing this, dealing with this in real life, what are some of the things that maybe you're either walking people through or you're helping them through to get to that point where the trauma isn't running the show? Because this isn't just easy as like flipping a switch, like, oh, my trauma's gone and I'm fine, right? So what is the kind of the process to get to that point where we can look at it as post-traumatic growth?
Yes. So what we know is that a lot of people and community, the world really tends to look at getting people back to who they used to be after their trauma. We all know people that have been through something awful and they go, I just want to be who I was before. And that's what I hear all the time. And coming in with that mindset is going to set us up for failure, because after we've been through trauma, we know that we're not the same person. We can't be the same person because of our experiences. As hard as it might be for someone who's experienced trauma, I certainly don't want you to think I'm downplaying it. It's really around looking at who you are despite the trauma and looking for the lessons and the learnings in that. So first of all, I look at what is important as a result of what's happened. So we know that after something bad happens, it puts things in perspective. We know what matters, so we look at people's values and who they really are, their real identity. So I start to look at helping them reclaim a little bit of joy in their life, connecting more deeply with their values, what matters, and then they'll start to feel stronger. Each time they connect to that little bit of joy, something they might have done as a little kid that they've disconnected from, something that used to bring light and laughter. And then we look at, okay, who are you now? What if we could look at that as being a learning opportunity and a gift? Because we know that there's strength that comes with surviving trauma. And then we work towards no longer defining ourselves by the trauma. Yes, it's happened. How are we going to use that as an opportunity to grow and start to move towards thriving rather than surviving?
Yeah, I love that reframe. And I think that's such an important distinction that you said. That is what, we as humans, it's like, right, we look for homeostasis, like we look for comfortability. So it's like, oh, I just want it to go back to normal. But you're right. And I think like we can look at that in multiple ways, looking at, oh, I'm not the same person. But I think if we look at it, like I always tell my clients this, and I work with them in obviously a different way than you, but I tell my clients this when they come back and they're like, oh, these symptoms that I was dealing with, they came back, none of the work, it's not working. No, you're a different person now than you were a year ago when you're dealing with these same symptoms. And it's the same thing with trauma, right? We can look at it in the positive way because it is a positive thing. You're not the same person. Like you have this wisdom and you have these learnings, and that's what we get to take with us forward. And I think that's such an important reframe.
And I don't want, again, people to think, oh, yeah, okay, suddenly I'll start thinking, oh, this is great, who I am now, and I've been through this and I'm okay. Not at all. There's a long process often that comes with getting people to the point of being ready to start to reframe it in that way. But once they're ready, it's like we can move them quite quickly and go, okay, who are you now? What's your identity? What's your values? Really step into that, and then we work on the emotional release. So letting go of the things that have been keeping us stuck, whether it's the flashbacks of what we've gone through, the emotions of anger, sadness, or the negative, what we would term negative emotions that are painful for us to carry around. And I take them through a process where we go through that and we work with the unconscious mind, not through hypnosis, but more a timeline therapy, and take them through the very first time they felt anger, sadness, fear, anxiety, and guilt and shame, because guilt and shame are huge after through lots of things, but particularly trauma. And once we can clear out each of those layers, level of hope and joy really increases. And then I tie it all up with nervous system regulation, because we know, and I know that you'll definitely relate to this, we know that trauma and all our experiences stay in our nervous system if they're not processed. So I go through a way using a thing called TRE, which is trauma and tension release exercises, where we teach people how to induce the body's natural tremoring response, and that releases very gently the layers of trauma and stress that they've held on to.
I love that process. I love the timeline techniques. I've used those before too. I learned those in my some certifications I've done. It's such a good framework. And you're right. It's the guilt and the shame. I talk about this all the time. I have a whole series about this, but the guilt and the shame are such tricky emotions, and it's just multi-layered, and it's like and so it makes it just, I don't know, I just feel like it's just, they're more complex emotions to let go of because they're just layered under so many things that guilt and shame, those are tricky. So let me ask you this. So when you have these techniques that you're using, and speaking of shame and guilt, especially shame, because it's like the most dense, right? It's like that lowest frequency emotion. So for shame, do you find that, does it ever happen that, you start to work with clients in this capacity and other things kind of come up that aren't related to this traumatic event that kind of compounds things, or like a freeing thing where it's like kind of the bundle of shame is able to dissolve? Like, how does that work with shame being so complex?
Yeah, it is definitely a very complex emotion. The process that I take people through, it's very much, we go to the very first time that they experience shame. So they might be fun and not really have any verbal way to articulate it, but they go back to a memory, because the body always stores every memory, every experience that we have. And it might feel like a feeling rather than I felt shame, and cognitively they can express it. But their brain will take them to this time. And once we clear that, everything ahead of that changes. So what I love about it is they don't even have to talk about what experience they're remembering, which is great and good for the therapist or the coach, because that vicarious trauma that we carry from other people's stories isn't there either, because we don't have to articulate it unless they choose to.
Yeah, no, that is so fascinating. And I think that's the power of like the timeline technique, right? Is you're not having to relive, because I think that's something that a lot of people are scared of. And it's funny we're talking about this because I was chatting with a colleague of mine, another coach that's a friend, and there's a very well-known trauma coach who apparently has a lot of, I think there's some litigation that she's in because she's teaching all these trauma things, but it's not very trauma informed. So people are like reliving their trauma. And I know that's people's worst fear, right? That's why people can shy away from work like this, because you're like reliving it. And so the fact that you can use this technique where you're like, no, just go back to the first time, and it kind of just cleans the slate. I mean, that's a really powerful technique.
It makes a big difference because, as you said, people don't want to go back and revisit stuff that's really painful or talk about it. And, I was taught very much cognitive behaviour therapy as a psychologist. That's what I was trained in, and that's the way I knew to do it for many, many years. And we would do exposure therapy and get people to talk about it over and over again. And knowing, obviously things advance and now we know more. And if we don't work with the somatic side of things and our nervous system, we're missing a whole component of a person.
Yeah.
So getting someone to go over and over it and expose them to it keeps them stuck. I look now and I go, oh dear. Yes, it worked. And for many people it still does. But you can't unknow when you know there's another way of doing it, and you can go back. So for me it's such a powerful way of helping people move through their trauma. And really what I'm doing, the people that I'm working with now aren't so much stuck in that PTSD. They've already come beyond the really intensive part, and I'm taking them towards hope and thriving rather than just getting through. So
no, that makes sense.
More functional.
Right.
Than the ones I used to work with.
Yeah. So there's a certain level of awareness that's required to kind of move through these pieces that you're doing. And the other thing I wanted to ask you about was the archetypes. You talk about the archetypes, which I'm really curious about. I love working with archetypes in any capacity, so I'm excited to hear this. But you talk about the archetypes of transformation and how that can help people move in this process that you're talking about and move into this post-traumatic growth. Can you speak to those archetypes?
Yes. So what I was seeing after a very long time, 35 years of working with people in trauma, I was seeing very similar patterns, that some people would experience trauma and no matter how many times they get knocked down, they could come back up, and you'd think, gosh, how can someone go through so much and still be standing? We all know people like that, right? And then there's others that would just really struggle and they'd try and run away and escape because it was too painful and too hard, and they'd never settle. They'd move all over the place. they'd go from job to job, and I'd think, something going on here. So then I had my own significant trauma and was on the other side of the couch. It was very uncomfortable. And I thought, nope, there's got to be something else. I started applying my processes to me. And then it was like one night I was just lying in bed and I thought, archetypes, I've got it. There's these archetypes, and we know, Carl Jung developed these archetypes way back. And I thought, what if I explore that a bit? So I got really creative, and it helped me to feel better to connect with these. And I chatted to a few friends and thought, I'm going to write a book on this. And all of this stuff came out. So I now have 7 archetypes that I've come up with. And the first one is the Phoenix Riser. So that's someone who, as I explained, they rise from the ashes of devastation. They're reborn with this fierce strength and renewed purpose. So they're the ones that go through the fire and come back out no matter what. The Resilient Sage, that's the wise soul who transforms pain into profound insight and guides others with grounded clarity. So we all have that someone who's always got that wisdom to impart, that really wise person. And there's the Empowered Trailblazer. So someone who, no matter what they've been through, has an idea and they forge new directions fueled by courage and vision. And we all know an empowered trailblazer. Then there's the Authentic Warrior, the brave person who sheds the mask and leads from authenticity. They're not afraid to be vulnerable. They share their story and help people move forward from a place of truth and emotional strength. Then we have the Reflective Orchestrator, and that's someone who's a really deep thinker, that despite all the chaos, they're more likely to think really deeply and transform pain through that energy that they've internalized, and then they can transform it using that introspection. And the Radiant Alchemist, that's someone who's really creative and who does a lot of art and things to recover, and someone who turns the emotional wounds into beauty, meaning and personal magic. And the Liberated Voyager is the escapee who's always running away, but in a positive way. The Freedom Seeker who breaks the generational cycles, and they aren't afraid to explore new things to get a different perspective. So they're the 7 archetypes. And what I found, and I wrote the book, and it's now being read all over the world, which is pretty exciting. And people are saying, oh my goodness, I really connected with whatever. So you have 3 main archetypes, but all the archetypes are within us. 3 will be stronger. So you might relate to, the Phoenix Riser, the Authentic Warrior, and the Radiant Alchemist. And the others are there, but we come from a place of our wound often for those other ones, rather than our strength. So there's positives and negatives with each of them. We know that when we're struggling in a certain way, there's going to be challenges. So if you already know that you are a reflective orchestrator and you know yourself really well and really deeply what your strengths are, you will also be able to say, but these are my challenges if I'm a reflective orchestrator. So you can preempt how to deal with it. And I love that. So it's a really good way of looking at strengths, weaknesses, and how to get out of them when they arise.
I love that. And like I said, I love working with archetypes for that reason you just said, like to really understand yourself on that level and so you can learn how to use them as strengths. And now when you were saying all of those, immediately my brain was like, oh my gosh, I feel like I could do a whole study on how human design types tie into which one are stronger. My brain could go so many places with that. I love that. And I love that. That's such an amazing tool to use. Again, I'm all about all the tools to help you know yourself better and know yourself on a deep level. And I feel like this is just another one of those because, the fact is we all deal with trauma. We're all going to deal with more trauma. Like this is life, right? And so it's just, so do you find that when you've worked with people and you help them understand these archetypes, that when, another traumatic thing happens in their life, do you see the effects of that? Like they're better equipped to deal with that? You see? Yeah.
Definitely. It doesn't mean, you won't still experience the trauma because you have to process it and grieve the loss of who you were and what's happened, but you can get yourself from trauma into post-traumatic growth a lot quicker. So these really accelerate your movement from trauma into post-traumatic growth. So instead of taking years or months, it's just, okay, yep, what strengths can I tap into? What challenges can I already foresee? And how do I go about it? And boom, you can move much quicker.
Yeah.
I've had a number of people say, they've gone through something not significant, but certainly little t trauma. And they've thought, yes, I came through that a lot quicker.
That's amazing. What a cool tool. You brought up something there that I wanted to touch on, because you talked about when they're going through the process, they're grieving the version of them that they used to be. And I've talked about this kind of here and there on the show in a different way. But I feel like just in general, we don't talk about grief enough, because there's so many different ways that we experience grief. Obviously, there's a grief of like losing a loved one or, going through a divorce, that kind of thing. But there's this grief of self that happens so many times. Like we've talked about, like kind of the dark night of the soul thing and grieving who used to be. But what you're just talking about is this version of you that existed before the trauma, and you have to grieve that part of you. I would love for you to speak on that, because I think that's something that I feel like when people can really understand that, this is a whole different level of like healing. Hey, y'all, we'll get right back to the episode. But first, let me ask you this. You've built a vision that others admire, and you've built something that you're really proud of. But behind the scenes, your body feels like it's lagging behind. It just can't quite catch up to your brilliance and your mission that you have. That late night second wind, the foggy mornings, the hormone shifts, the endless push and forcing. You can't strategize your way out of that. And you already know you don't need more supplements. You don't need another supplement stack. You also don't need another side hustle disguised as self-care, because nobody wants to have their health as a side hustle. This is about recalibrating your entire ecosystem. And that's why I created the Quantum Reset, a premium 3-month high-touch healing experience for visionary women who are ready to feel as powerful in their bodies as they do in their business. Inside, we decode your nervous system, your minerals, your hormones. We read your labs like the sacred text that it is, so we have actual answers. And then we pair that with deep energetic recalibration, subconscious release. We use gene keys, we use human design, and true embodied healing. This isn't about fixing burnout, because that's not what we're doing here. This is about becoming the woman whose body is powerful, whose body is completely electric, whose energy, clarity, radiance finally matches the size of her mission. If you know your success isn't meant to cost you your vitality, and you're ready for a science-backed, spirit-led reset, then the Quantum Reset is your invitation. So check the link in the show notes or send me a message on Instagram, and let's bring your body back online with your brilliance. Now, let's get back to the show.
So as I said, the identity work is key, and that's about looking at who, and sometimes I'll get people to say, who, describe how you used to be. And we know that when we've lost sight of that, we can tend to idealise how we were and how wonderful things were, and we know that wasn't the reality. So, but it's that pain and that coming from that wound we have that we can only see the positives of how things used to be because it's so painful where we are now. So it's really important that I get people to go, okay, who were you? And draw a really good picture of that and really step into that. And then who are you now? And then we'll start to peel off the layers. Well, okay, this is what I see. Ask a couple of other people in your life how they see you now. And of course, all those strengths and those things are still there. So when they get that feedback, they go, oh, they said this, this, and this. And ask them how they think you are in how have you changed now. And then they'll ask that, and then they'll go, oh, they actually think I'm stronger now. Well, obviously give them these positive things that they haven't been able to see themselves. So then we've got the old you and the new you, and then we look at how, and I often will get them to write down all the different things, put it in a box, and then we'll have a burning ceremony where we can really step into that new identity and let go of the old version of themselves that was never perfect anyway. And then that's the way that we can help them grieve that loss and actually rebrand themselves and own who they are now, connect with the values, reclaim joy, and reshape how they're relating to the world now.
Yeah.
So that grief is really about acknowledging their pain.
Man, that's so powerful. I love a good ceremony. So I love the burning ceremony. I think that's such a powerful way to like really anchor that in. And I do think that because you made a good point saying that, we kind of idealize what it was like before. And you're like, was it really that great? Because it seems so terrible now. It had to have been so great before. And so I think that's such a good thing to really be realistic and have to put it all down on paper and then the ceremonies. I think that's such a great practice that we can do at any time. Right? When we're, going through a change and we're going through an up level. I think that's so often what keeps us stuck. We feel like we're spinning our wheels or we're stuck in mud, just whether it's in business. I just high achieving women that were listening to this, right? Whether it's in business or a career, whatever, relationships. But obviously the trauma thing, I feel like that's a big piece, or could be, correct me if I'm wrong, could be a big piece of why people do get kind of stuck in that loop. And they do feel, when you were talking about the other modalities that maybe aren't as effective, right? And for doing a lot of talking through it. But I think that's one thing is it's not having that awareness of this is a new version of me on the other side of the trauma, and just kind of separating those two and being okay with stepping into the new version. So I think that's such a really powerful part of the healing.
Yeah, and one of the other things that I really love that I find powerful and people can connect with it quite quickly is using that 3 brains analogy. So the head, the heart, and the gut brain. And you definitely would know this with your background, how important the gut is, and we often ignore that.
Yes.
So people think that and when we go through trauma, we're very much in our heads and overthinking and overanalyzing and trying to make sense of whatever has happened and the pain that we're experiencing. But what we see after trauma is people often disconnect their heart brain, so they stop feeling because it's too painful. And if they've had a lot of trauma, they have lost their trust in themselves to trust their gut. So the gut and the heart brain are often disconnected, or one or the other. The head brain's usually always connected because we're overthinking it. But what we can do is just do basic body scans where they start to tune into their head, their heart and their gut, and really start to let them reintegrate. And that's just a visualization process where they check in with what's going on and what are they in their head and say, and where are you feeling that in your body? And most people go, no, I don't know, I can't feel it. It's like, just tune into that. Just allow yourself to drop into your body, and then they'll go, oh, it's in my stomach or my head or whatever. And we're able to then start to reconnect it. Yeah, so it makes a big difference. And that's also really good with that letting go and the grief side of things, because if we reintegrate that, they can really connect with who they are now and feel alive and empowered and whole again.
Yeah, 100%. Yeah, putting that, because you're right. That's where when we get stuck in that emotional loop, we're stuck in our head because our brain has to make sense of everything. And then we attach the stories to the emotions. I talk to my clients about this all the time. We talk about emotions, and it's not the emotion, it's the story you've attached to the emotion. And that's why you're looping, and it's like you're replaying all the things in your head. And so, yeah, I love that analogy with the brain, because, and I do think that's, even though I'm not working with people specifically who have done, like I said, we're humans. So all of us have dealt, big tier loyalty trauma at some point. And so when I'm dealing with the emotions, that is such a tricky thing for people to reconnect back with the body when you're so used to being in your mind. And just in Western society in general, we're all mental, analytical, we have to make sense of it, and, logical brain people. So it is a tricky thing to get back into your body. So that's where the next question I want to ask you, for people who, and you mentioned the body scan, obviously that's a really good tool, but do you have any other tools to share with the women listening to kind of reconnect that, to get back into their body and reconnect with that heart and the gut and putting it back in the body and out of the head, mind?
I often I just take someone through a real body scan, and then what we do is I talk them through, and I have pre-recorded modules and things like that. So, but often I do that really as a live component. So really it's just around having them go through calming their body, just being in the moment, and then as if there's a bright light coming through your heart space, and then having that flow through your body, and then allowing it to move around the head, the heart and the gut, and letting a symbol come through, and that symbol is usually, whatever the person's favourite thing is or something meaningful to them, and connecting to that symbol and parking it somewhere in their body that they can tap into and refill their cup each day. So when they wake up in the morning, tap into wherever that symbol is. So for me, it's a butterfly, and because that represents that transformation and healing, and I have it parked in my heart space. And every time something positive happens through the day, at the end of the day, I just fill my heart space and fill that butterfly with that love and strength and power from the day. And then I go to bed. And when I wake up, I check in whether it's depleted and it needs more of a top up or whether it's filled for the day. So that's something really, really basic that you can do yourself. And the more you practice it, the better it becomes.
Love that practice.
Calming music on in the background, and just give yourself like 10 minutes from the top of your head right down to the tips of your toes. Notice any niggly bits and let that pass through your body and let it go, send it on its way, and then get that shining bright light coming through into your heart space. And you'll know it'll change colour. You can build up the energy, have it flow right through you as if going through your bloodstream.
I love that practice. I love that. And the power of visualization cannot be underestimated. I don't know if you know Dr. Joe Dispenza, but there's one of his meditations. It's, you create a symbol and that's what you're holding in your mind's eye. And it just helps like put all the pieces together. So I love that, the use of the symbol. That's so powerful. You've given us so many amazing tools here, Nat. I appreciate this conversation so much. Everybody who's listening is listening because they're here to grow. And this is such a really important conversation. So all of us can get into that space of post-traumatic growth, whether we've had big T, little t trauma. So thank you for bringing your insight and your wisdom. And I do have one more question that I want to ask you, but before I ask you that, can you let everybody know where they can find out more about you, if they want to reach out to you to work with you and everything, and your book, all of the things?
Thank you. I have a website, which is a work in progress. I've got lots of new stuff to put on there. It's just Dr. as in DR, drnataliegreen.com.au, because I'm in Australia. So put the .au on the end. And I'm on Instagram, Dr. Nat Green, and Facebook, Dr. Natalie Green. And I post on there pretty regularly. I'm about to head off to Europe for a month, and I'm going to be doing my own post-traumatic growth work and shedding another layer. So everyone's more than welcome to follow me over there.
Oh, I love that.
And I tend to walk my talk. So walk my walk and talk my talk, and really like to be authentic and show up that, there's another layer that's due to come off, and I want to do that while I'm en route and really start to do that. So find me over there and you'll see the book, The Break Your Trauma Cycle, is available. The links, I think, in my Instagram bio. So
perfect.
And I'd love to connect. If anyone wants to DM me or whatever, I'm happy to chat. Always on for a connection. That's great. Thank you.
Yeah, for sure. The links to all that will be in the show notes, of course. So follow along. I love the share the journey stuff. So we will all follow your journey as you holiday in Europe. Perfect. Okay. The last question I want to ask you is a question that I ask everybody as we wrap up. What do you think is the most important thing you can do to live with purpose?
Great question. To be authentic and to stop trying to do things for everyone else. To really connect deep inside and think, what do I want? Not what the picture other people have for me. What really matters to me? So connecting for me, it's identity, values, and deep in our bones, I believe we all have a purpose. And when we tune into that, it's very clear what it is, but we're not very good at tuning in. Listen to other people's messages. So getting really in tune with ourselves is so important, and not being afraid to stand tall and shine our light and live with purpose, because I think we're all here to do something important in this world.
Yeah, I couldn't agree more. I love that answer. Thank you so much, Nat, for joining us and hanging out with us today. And this was just such an empowering conversation. Thank you. Okay.